Okay, so you've already written your body paragraphs. You've written a paragraph about how setting has been used to develop theme, and you've written a paragraph about how characterization has been used to develop a theme. So now we want to add in our intro, which would obviously come at the beginning of our essay, and then our conclusion to end our essay. So in the end, we'll have all 4 body paragraphs. So I have a document here. It might look a little different than the document that you're working with, but we're all following these basic steps. So this one's a little more detailed maybe than what you'll actually work with, but I want to go through the steps and the pieces to make sure that you feel comfortable with what it is that you're writing. So our prompt was, how do specific characters, how they're characterized, and the setting help to develop the theme? So we already know that's what we've been writing about, right? We've written about how the setting was used to develop the theme, like I said, and then we wrote a paragraph discussing how Jonas, as a dynamic character, develops the theme, that change that he goes through. It's integral to the development of theme. Okay, so something we want to think about is our hook, right? We know in an intro, we first have to hook the reader in. If you remember, I describe it as though, someone, if you go to someone and say, hey, do you want to read this essay I wrote about this book that we've read? Most people are going to be like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. So remember, the hook kind of tricks them into thinking that your essay is about something else. And then you connect it to the book and you end up discussing the literature, but you kind of pique their interest and trick them into reading, thinking that they're going to read about something else through a hook strategy. So we have a few hook strategies that we could suggest, but you can use any of the resources that we have linked in. You'll remember we talked about a bunch of different types of hooks, of attention getters, shocking statements, metaphors, telling a story. People love stories. Using some type of really interesting, thought-provoking quotation, maybe that you research and you find, using humor, telling a joke, coming up with an ironic situation, starting with maybe a poem or a part of a poem that connects to your topic. We also have some notes here as well, just to remind you of what the intro looks like: hook, bridge, thesis. And we have some examples. So there are lots of resources, but a couple things that you might want to think about. Maybe going to find a really interesting quote about conformity. Right? We could trick them to kind of think that this paper is going to be about conformity itself, which is really interesting as a social concept, because we all experience it. We have all, experienced peer pressure, trying to fit in, conformity when it's helpful, conformity when it's not helpful. So that's something our audience can relate to. You could ask a series of questions related to what we would want for our own community based on Jonas's experiences. Would you trade art for peace? Would you trade, love to experience no pain? You could create an imagine if scenario to make your reader imagine what it would be like to live in a community like Jonas's. So there are some strategies that you might be able to use and incorporate pretty easily. But sky's the limit. Just don't talk about the text yet. Remember, you're just pulling in a concept that's related to the text. But when we read the hook, we shouldn't know that we're about to read about the giver. You're going to use the bridge and the thesis to establish that. So trick me first, interest me, and then move into the actual topic, which is the giver, and how characterization and setting are used to develop theme. So I just want you to think about theme. I need you to remember that you used one theme for both the setting paragraph and the characterization paragraph. So what was that theme? Keep that in mind, right? Because as we're working on an intro, we know that the purpose of this essay is to convince our readers that that theme was developed by setting and characterization. So I want to have that theme fresh in my mind. I'm going to come up with my hook, And then I might need to bridge it, right? Because it's not about the giver. So I need to connect that hook to the topic of the thesis or to the novel. And I need to make sure in this paragraph that I have the book title and that it's capitalized and it's in italics, it's italicized. So here's an example. Let's say I do an interesting hook about conformity or about not being given choices. And then I can bridge by saying, in The Giver, Jonas's community lives without choices and everyone must conform. So now I've gone from some type of hook about conformity or lack of choices into its connection to The Giver. Now I need to provide a brief summary of the novel. So this should only be 3 to 4 sentences. Right? So I need to know, what's the basic problem that Jonas faces, and how does he eventually resolve it. So 3 to 4 sentences. I need to know in those 3 to 4 sentences the basics of what happens in the book. And then we need to get to the thesis. So the thesis is what you're proving, and you're proving that characterization and setting help to develop the theme. So you can even use this example thesis, but switch in your information. Shirley Jackson uses characterization and setting to develop the theme. People must examine social norms and challenge them if norms are harmful to society. So that was a thesis statement based on an essay I could write about The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. Instead, obviously, you are writing about The Giver, Lois Lowry, and the theme that you've chosen. So you want to make sure that the word settings in your thesis, the word characterizations in your thesis, the word theme is in your thesis. You've got the author in your thesis. So then once you have all of your pieces, you're going to put it together in a paragraph. And you're going to go into your document and you're going to grab your setting paragraph, copy and paste it in, right? You have it in Polaris. And then go get your characterization paragraph, which is also in Polaris, and copy and paste it in. So we kind of have all of the pieces of our essay in this document. Okay, and then we're going to get into the conclusion. So before we dive into the conclusion, let's take a look at the example of the introduction. So this is about a completely different topic. This is a short story that was written about, but all of the elements of an essay are basically the same. And this one is about characterization and setting as well. So it works pretty well as an example. So this is the intro. Thump, thump, thump. The beating of your heart and your quickened breaths are the only sounds that register. Everything else is white noise. You look to your left, there's no one. You look to your right, and you sense your opponent closing in. You put your head down as adrenaline pulses through your body, and you push yourself across the finish line. Okay, so right now, my reader thinks that he or she is reading something interesting about a race. This is not about a race. I'm tricking the reader. I'm going to talk about a piece of literature. So now I need to bridge that. So what does running have to do with, in this case, my story or my thesis? Squeaky is no doubt a good runner and practices all the time. I'm sorry. Squeaky, the main character in Raymond's Run by Toni Cade Bambara, experienced the thrill of crossing the finish line in a Mayday race that changed everything. So you can see I linked running with then an introduction of the short story, a character in the short story. And I even have the name of the short story here. Squeaky is no doubt a good runner and practices all the time, but most of the time her younger brother Raymond, who is differently abled, has to be dragged along. However, one thing Squeaky can't do is lose, because that would mean someone else wins, which would ruin her reputation. She and her new rival Gretchen are racing in the Mayday program, but Squeaky sees Raymond running along the fence and has a change of heart. She and Gretchen are waiting to find out results, but for once, Squeaky doesn't care if she wins because Raymond is her champion. She decides that she's going to train Raymond instead of worrying about her own racing career. So what you can see we've done there is provided a nice brief summary of the whole short story from the conflict to the resolution. And now, thesis. In the story, Toni Cade Bambara uses setting and characterization to develop the theme that it is important to be unselfish. So there's your full intro. We have our hook, we have a bridge, we have a summary, and we have a thesis statement. Okay, so now we're going to move into the conclusion. So in the conclusion, we're going to start with the transition. like in conclusion, comma, we are going to restate the thesis and topic sentences in a new way. So I need to go look at what I have proven, right? So I'm going to look back at my thesis statement. I'm going to look at my 2 topic sentences, and then using different language, I'm going to make sure that my reader remembers what he or she should have learned from each of my paragraphs. Make sure you switch the language around. Make sure it's not repetitive. And then you're going to leave your reader with the so what. Remember, the so what is the lesson that he or she can take away from reading your essay, something that he or she can apply in life or to reading in the future as a result of learning from you. You might think about next time you read a book, or think carefully about the kind of society, or be careful, maybe some cautionary advice as a result of learning of some of the concepts that you developed through your theme or through your exploration of characterization and or setting. And then again, you're going to put all of your pieces together to make the full paragraph. So again, we have that same example linked in, and we'll look down at the last paragraph to look at the conclusion. In conclusion, setting is a crucial component to the development of characters. Readers are able to more fully understand the characters and their qualities, as well as actions, if they have an awareness of the character's surroundings. These elements also factor into the theme, which hopefully resonates with the reader. Squeaky was able to change her flawed character trait, and we can do the same with a little self-reflection. Imagine yourself back in that race, but this time you don't care if you win or lose. Instead, your character means more to you than another medal. If every person in the world worked on improving one of their negative character traits, the world would be a better place. So you definitely can see we have a restatement of the ideas that we developed, and we have so what here. There's also a little bit of a return to the hook, which is a nice creative addition, which you certainly can try for, even if it's not required. It's a nice little way to challenge yourself. So you know your basic pieces, you've got lots of resources linked in, and now it's just time to kind of put everything together. So in the end, when we look at this document, we'll see your intro, we'll see the 2 body paragraphs you've already written, and we'll see the conclusion, so that later on, our next step will to be you take all of these, put them in a document, and put them in MLA format, which we will talk about later.